Welcome to Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth, the podcast where we explore the beautiful, messy and transformative magic that happens when we dare to go within. I'm your host, Robin Harris, and in each episode we'll dive into real, honest stories from people who've faced their fears, embraced their vulnerabilities and discovered unexpected growth in their personal lives, careers, or businesses. This is a space for deep listening, open hearts, and soul-nourishing conversations. Because when we meet ourselves in our rawest moments, that's often where our greatest wisdom starts. Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. And I'm absolutely delighted to have with me today Cassie Watts. I first came across Cassie through a networking event where Cassie was the speaker, and I thought her message was so good that I had to invite her on to join us here on the podcast. So welcome, Cassie.
Thank you so much.
And just by way of introduction, as I always do, Cassie is a self-leadership coach for ambitious, high-performing parents who are brilliant at what they do, but are absolutely done with sacrificing themselves, second-guessing, and running on empty while pretending they've got it all handled. Cassie's clients don't just stop at self-awareness. Her 4-step LEAD method gives them a process they can use in real time to catch the overthinking, the self-doubt, and the spiral of saying yes to everything while their own life gets pushed to the back of the queue. She helps people expand their capacity so they can be present and intentional in the way they do business and show up at home without white-knuckling their way through either. Cassie herself is a single mum of 4 teenagers, a former member of a high-demand religion, and someone who built her entire life from the inside out. She coaches the way she lives, warm, direct, and zero fluff. I love that, Cassie. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So, as a starter question, I've just mentioned the things of the what of you, the things that you do. You're a mother, you're a business owner, an entrepreneur. But would you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah. So I like to think who I am is I like to think that I'm quite a zero kind of fluff person. I need things very, very practical. And so I like to think who I am kind of embodies that too, because life gets really, really busy with all of the do's, as we've just listed out there. And I think that meeting all of the challenges of life with compassion and practicality has become a part of who I am. I run a really tight ship at home, and that means that I've had to soften within myself because I think when you are really busy and when you are a high performer, or high achiever, whatever way you want to say it, it can get really difficult to lose the who. And so for me, I've had to mix my who with my what. And so I try to lead with a lot of compassion, a lot of patience, a lot of fun. I'm very playful. My kids and I have got this constant game going on, I will say, where there's a lot of play in our house, there's a lot of song, there's a lot of music. Um, I I love to I love to have the experience in the aliveness of life and feeling. Maybe a year ago, I don't know if it was a compliment or not, but he said, well, we know that Cassie feels all depths of all emotions. And and I took it as a great compliment because I think that I would rather be someone who feels deeply than what I was, which was very, very numb. And so part of my who, a lot of my who I am has changed over the years because of the what I do. And so I like to think I'm playful and fun and zero fluff in terms of the practicality, um, but lots of softness and generosity and compassion. Things that I've learned that I needed, basically, is what I have allowed myself to become,
Which is
hopefully.
it's wonderful, and I would take that as a compliment too, that you feel the depth of every emotion, because I think that's what we're here for. I think that's actually our purpose, to feel and experience
Mm.
all of whatever experience comes our way.
Yeah,
And
and I think we so sorry, go on.
no, no, carry on.
So often we acknowledge that, oh, yes, now I'm feeling all of this anger. This is great. Now I'm feeling all of this. I'm allowing myself to feel this. But on the flip side, we don't actually allow ourselves to feel all of the happiness and all of the peace and all of the contentment and all of the fulfillment, because that's not so, in the well-being world, that doesn't look so healing. But when we see someone, really facing their trauma and feeling all of that, that's, I feel more, what I see is more celebrated. And so when we talk about the depth of emotion, it is also allowing ourselves to experience all of it, the whole spectrum, and unlimited.
That's a really interesting point. And I think the anger and all of that very big, sometimes very raw emotion is easy to see, and it is something that we may have suppressed because nice girls don't get angry, and it's also very vulnerable, if you're crying and there's all that tears and snot, and it's not pretty, and it's probably something that we have been suppressing. But have we been allowing ourselves the other side?
Yeah,
Because the quietness that we may have been displaying up until that point wasn't necessarily peace, was it?
no,
So to really get to the point, I'm big on safety, getting to the point where we feel safe enough to go to those extremes of stillness. And, I say extremes, I mean the depths of really feeling all of that in the same way as feeling the anger and the hurt and all of those things. But allowing ourselves to really experience the stillness and the
mm,
calm and the joy, which can be a really quiet joy. And for me, WILD is an acronym. The W is wonder. That
mm,
sense of awe at this world, at ourselves and the body that we live in, which was never something that I was able to experience either. So I think it often is when we've come through something and then we realize what we missed all those
mm.
years and that grieving process, but then coming out into now I get to give myself permission and to choose that I can do
Yeah,
this.
and not to push it away, not to
Definitely.
put a spanner in the works.
Yes.
Mm.
So, my quick fire round then for helping the audience to get a sense of what we're going to be talking about today. What makes your story relatable for others?
Because I'm human, because they're human, because so often I see all of the different symptoms, like the top layer of what people are experiencing, and they tend to focus on those symptoms rather than actually the underlying pattern and story that's happening. And my story is relatable because everyone experiences shame, everyone experiences having their voice quietened, everyone experiences embarrassment and humiliation and feeling like they're the only one and it must be me and I'm broken and I can't really say what I feel or need. And I don't even know what I need because I've never allowed myself to explore what I need, because my job here is to make everybody else, like, just appease everyone. like every story is relatable because underneath all of the symptoms, they all change, but underneath the human experience is the same.
Beautiful. And who do you feel will gain the most from listening in?
Probably someone who has a long history of living somebody by somebody else's compass, where there is this kind of constant underlying pressure of doing, of being everything to everyone, of achievement, and that being your kind of, or achievement or service or helping people or doing things for other people has become your identity, has become you've become the yes person. You maybe played the hero role in other people's lives.
And what do you hope people will take away from listening in today?
Oh, that you have a choice. That this is, people so often mistake their personality traits or character traits, and that's what they think they are, but actually they're learnt behaviors and they're learnt stories. And when I worked that out, I was like, oh, wow, I get to choose this and I get to challenge this. Okay, I think this about myself, and maybe that is a part of the core of who I am. But actually there's another side to that part of me that actually doesn't feel good. And two things can be true at the same time. I can um, like for me, helping people has always been a part. It was a part of the culture that I grew up in. It's a part of my family culture. It's a part of me. I love that about me, but not to the point where I'm self-sacrificing. And so it's being able to, yeah, if you're listening in and maybe nodding along, you have a choice. You get to be curious and you get to challenge those narratives and leave alone, put down the parts that really you can feel that they don't feel good. You have evidence all around your life that it's not your path and it's not who you need to be. And you really get to channel into who you do want to be.
I love that you brought up the fact it can be both and. So
Mm,
we can love that aspect of ourselves while at the same time respecting ourselves so that we then, well, I love
yeah,
this part of me, but I have boundaries
yeah.
and I get to choose where those
Mm,
boundaries are. And I get to
yeah,
listen to my body that then tells me, mm-mm, the boundaries here are being
yeah.
pressed, threatened
Mm,
in some way at some point. And then I get to challenge that.
yeah.
Fantastic. And you describe yourself as having gone from a performing version of yourself who kept
Mm.
everyone around you comfortable to now truly leading yourself. What was the moment that you realized the version of you that everybody else saw from the outside wasn't actually the true you that you knew from the inside?
Well, again, for me, it was the two things being true at the same time because what was it? I don't know, maybe 10 years ago now. Yeah, 10 years ago. Um, my stepdad gave me a book called The Big Leap. I'm trained with Gate and Katie. I'm a leap coach. And I remember listening to that book and then The Anatomy of Peace by the Arbinger Institute and then all of Brené Brown's collection. And it was a slow undoing. There wasn't a moment, but I remember that because of the culture I'd grown up in and the family culture that I have, which I love, by the way, of service, that I had well and truly. In fact, there's a quote from the religion that I grew up in. There's a story about one of the leaders going on a mission, which is a 2 year voluntary role to teach people about the religion and about Jesus Christ. And he was out on a mission and he wrote to his dad. This was like, what, 60 years ago. He wrote to his dad to tell him he was struggling and I'm really homesick and I want to come home because they live very, very strict rules when you're out being a me. And he wrote to his dad and he said, I'm really struggling. And his dad wrote back to him and said, forget yourself and go to work. And that quote is very famous in the I grew up in. And it can be very helpful because when you're so stuck in your own head, you can't see anyone else. And actually, it's really helpful to just go and help another person, and it puts things into perspective. Yes, there are two things at the same time that can be very helpful. But when an entire culture is kind of based on when you're in the service of your fellow beings, you are only in the service of your God. That's another quote. And forget yourself and go to work. And I could tell you 100 others like it. And so I had become this person, this mum with four very young children at the time, and I had four kids in 4 years, no, four in 4.5, 5 years. Um, so I was, exhausted, but we had these volunteer roles, and that took up a lot of time. And I'd just become this person who had literally was the embodiment of forget myself and go to work. And so I was listening to these books, Brené Brown, Gay and Katie Hendricks and the Arbinger Institute, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can be in service of people. I can support and help people, but I don't have to be drowning while I'm doing it. And instantly I had so many shame responses, like there must be something wrong with me. I'm like, I must be a terrible person to not want this anymore. And it was a long time. Like it wasn't this moment and then suddenly it was all gone. It was a long time of unlearning that belief of performance. And it was performative. It was very performative, like literally interviews where, performance of the rated who were worthy to go into like the next stage of whatever it was in the religion. And so your performance is literally being evaluated. And that was a slow unlearning. And even today, I have to challenge that narrative because, I grew up in that religion and I was there for 34 years. It's not a slow undoing.
It can be a
Um,
lifetime, can't it, as we slowly begin to see and learn how to
yes.
put down those things that were our norm, that we took for granted, that we assumed everybody else in the world lived that way, and that it must be the
Yeah.
right way. Because when you're taught by
Yeah.
parents and teachers and people you respect, that's how we take
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you talk about how high performing people often wear this badge of, I've got this. And it's like a badge of honor. But looking back, what was the biggest untruth that you were telling yourself during that time? And what finally gave you that permission? You mentioned the books and the learning from Brene Brown and the Hendrickses and so on. But what was it that finally inside of you felt, I now have permission to stop this pretending?
Because I was so out of alignment with myself. I knew it. My whole body knew it. I was making myself sick. And when you, in fact, so in 2018, I had a breakdown and I was hospitalized and I knew they weren't. I had MRI scans, I had all sorts of tests, and I knew they weren't going to find anything because I was so out of alignment with my own very way of being. It made me sick. And in terms of high achievers, all of my clients, that's kind of where I focus on in that area, and I see it all the time. And when we go back, I do a lot of work from their childhood, and when we go back, they always had the role of the appeaser, of the overperformer, of the carer, of the one that kept the peace, of there's a lot of different versions of that role, but they all fall within the hero persona. And it was the one that said, don't worry, everyone, you can all be screw ups, I've got it. Maybe not screw ups, that might be harsh, but in some families it's not, it's very accurate. With the high performer, there is always a pattern of this is where I get my validation. This is where I get my worth. This is where I get my pat on the head. And so we're still living to that, 5-year-old self, 2-year-old self, 15-year-old self, whatever it was. And for some people in their families, it is, I mean, it's explicitly said, they're literally treated. Some teenagers are paid to get really high results. And I did have a client once, his parents were MPs, they were living in France, and he was at Oxford, and his mum contacted me and said, "Can you help my son?" And I said, "Well, not without him really wanting help." And when I met with him, he just said, you know, I think I probably know what's wrong with me, which is the phrase in and of itself. But when we got talking, he said, Cassie, I've never had to do anything. My school was set out for me. I didn't even have to try to get into Cambridge. It was all set up because of who my parents are. And I know that when I leave here, it doesn't matter what results I get. I know what job I'm into. I'm going into politics. And when, you break that down, of course he's depressed. He doesn't want to go into politics. He doesn't want to be at Cambridge. He wants to be off doing X, Y, Z. And when you're so far out of alignment with yourself, that is so many of them, because people are so far out of what feels peaceful to them. And that was my experience. And it has been the experience of so many of my clients, because they're not doing, saying, and being what they actually want to be. They're following the narrative, and they're following the path of what was set for them a really long time ago, either through literally being told this is your path, or through the role that they had to play in their families.
And I love what you're saying there, and how our body really does know, doesn't it? This is alignment for me, or this is not alignment for me. And the further we go, the more it starts to tell us you are way out of line. And I think of it like the car lane assist, that when the car starts to drift, there's a signal, a beep or whatever. And that's what our body's doing. It's just giving us that little alert. You're drifting. Shall we just nudge back again? But the further and further we go, that louder that alarm needs to sound to draw our attention to, you've gone really far out of lane. Let's go back. Please, let's go back.
I
It's
do want to
always
note
there.
that. Oh, sorry.
I
Sorry,
was
go
just
on.
going to say, it's always there seeking to support us. It's not something that's gone wrong. It's not random. It's not a mistake. It's the body seeking to support us, which is why when you start to listen, things start to fall into place. Yes, sometimes initially it feels like my world is falling apart. I don't know who I am anymore. This is really feeling out of my control and overwhelming. But and it feels really alien, but that's simply because it's so different to how we've been used to and what we've seen, what has been normalized for us, when it isn't actually normal or appropriate.
No, and I do want to note that we in society, but also in our family systems, trained from a very, very young age to ignore that to ignore that sense of self. And so most people, this is why awareness isn't enough too, because most people they don't know what that signal is. So we were talking about the cars and the changing lanes. They don't know what that sound is. When their body is out of alignment, they don't know. So they just cover it up and cover it up and numb out and numb out and numb out, because for a very, very long time, they've been systematically taught to shut down that part of them that says, well, hang on a minute, this doesn't feel good.
It's very true. Our whole culture is set up around that. And
Yeah.
it's something that I talk about. But this isn't about pointing fingers of blame either. So our parents may have taught us these things. I know I remember specifically my dad saying to me, it's a big, bad, scary world out there. Ooh.
Mm.
And, I was already pre-programmed to take that on board as, oh my goodness, it really is big. There are monsters out there. You don't want to be out there. And fair
Yeah.
enough, I grew up in Belfast in the Troubles, so he was right. But it was just the whole package that I took on board from that. Possibly more than he intended, but also from his perspective, he may well have been doing that to keep me safe.
Yeah.
Just sadly, his learning as he was growing up didn't give him the tools that he could then have passed on to me to be safe and to know what my safety is, to know how to regulate myself. And when I feel unsafe, what is good to do about that. He didn't have that, and I didn't get it from him. And I think
No.
largely my mum didn't have that. I think she probably had a better experience growing up, but still, you look at the choices that people make and you think, oh, if you'd been feeling aligned and feeling balanced or balancing, I talk about it as a verb rather than a noun, but if you were in that good space, you wouldn't have made the choices that you made. And once you realized this isn't working, you would have done something to change that and to get back into that sense of, yes, I'm on my path. But both of my parents had fallen outside of their path and they were just carrying on.
Doing the best they can with what they've
They
got,
were.
right?
They were, absolutely. With the
Yeah.
resources that they had access to, they
Yeah.
were doing the best that they could do.
Yeah.
Even though for me at the time that was very hard to believe.
Yes, I can imagine.
And you've just said that awareness isn't actually enough in and of itself.
No.
And I've been working with somebody who knows so much. She has so much awareness, and she is saying it isn't enough. So this is absolutely true. We need something practical in those moments when those old patterns are reactivated, they show up again. We need more than just awareness. Awareness isn't going to cut it. Can you share a real example of a situation where old Cassie would have behaved in a particular way or responded in a particular way, but now current Cassie has gone beyond just awareness and is able to deal with things differently?
Yeah, one example comes to mind. I mean, hundreds. One comes to mind. I remember when I first started my business, I'd been a housewife for 15 years and home educated and flexi schooled, and we'd been traveling for 8 months and we relocated to Norfolk. And for the first time ever, all four of my children were in school and I started a business. And I thought I hired an office and hired a business coach, and she gave me loads of stuff to do. And I just remember sat in that office and I was frozen. And I just cried and cried. And I had a yoga mat on the floor. I love a day nap as well as a bit of stretching practice. But I had a yoga mat on the floor and I was sat, it was next to my desk. And I remember curling up on the yoga mat for the entire work day. And I just cried all day. And I got deeper and deeper into the story of I'm pathetic, I'm not good enough, who do I think I am? I'm wasting all of this money. Just go and get a job, no one's going to listen to you. And that was probably like the first week of me opening my business, and I just didn't really have a clue what I was doing. And that lasted for a really long time. That kind of narrative, I knew it was happening. I did not know how to stop it. I knew what I wanted to do in my business, and I could not understand why at the time I was doing the exact opposite thing that was going to help me create a successful business. And now I have all the tools, and that kind of thing might last for, if it comes up, no more than 10 seconds. And I'm done and I've moved on and I've yeah, expressed what needs to be expressed and seen what needs to be seen, and there I move on.
And I love
But
that you bring up the point that these things still happen. You just
oh, of course,
navigate them very differently.
yeah.
So it's not that I have changed and my life is now smooth, plain sailing. No.
I will say probably they probably happen 10 times less than they did happen, because obviously a lot of things have changed and I'm no longer in the habit of speaking to or about myself like that. But humans are human. That's something I really struggle with within the wellness industry, all of the gurus that hype all of this stuff up top. but the real human experience is, of course, it happens. We have the triggers that trigger our stress response, and then we have the glimmers that invite us into the safety. And now, primarily, I spend my life in safety, but I am human, and therefore I get triggered into the grip of my stress response.
Yeah.
But
It's
it's
just that it happens less and you navigate it with
much,
um, more experience, with more tools, more
yeah,
quickly,
yeah,
more with more sense of safety, with more, oh, it's this. I know how to deal with this.
yeah,
I really have got this now.
yeah. Rather than it just being an affirmation that I say
Yes,
over
not
and
just
over again,
words.
that
Yeah,
actually causes more hurt than anything else.
yeah, yeah. And that's a really important point that affirmations can actually be
Create
challenging
stress.
for us. Yeah, they can make us feel more shamed if
Yeah,
they're not something that we truly feel and can truly sit with and
yeah.
believe. But if we're just using them because we believe we should, I hate that word should.
Mm.
I'm very fortunate in that my mum, from a reasonably young age, was saying, ditch, should, must, have to. They
There
have
you
no
go.
place in your vocabulary.
Mm. Nice.
So if somebody is listening into this conversation and nodding along, as you said, recognizing themselves in this story, they're somebody who's constantly putting other people first. They overthink those decisions and they feel exhausted, but just can't give themselves permission to pause. What would you gently want them to know before they even try to change anything? Just what would you like to share?
Well, I'm guessing their life or experiences in their life feel like they're pushing a sofa up a mountain, and it's wholly unnecessary if you actually think about the visual of pushing a sofa up a mountain. And if you can't even get to the point where you can give yourself permission to pause, there is something probably going on in you that is fueled by shame or fear. And guilt is the behavior, shame is the self. So instead of I did something bad, it becomes I am bad. And I just invite you to, um, well, maybe not even invite you, because even if you're not there yet, but I would like you to know that a universal truth is that you are equally as enough, just as I am, just as Robin is, and that human to human, there is no less than and there is no more than, that we are all on the same plane. It is the stories that we are living our lives by that pit one against the other and make us feel ashamed of ourselves. And so even if you can't pause yet, I would like you to know that you and I are on an even keel, and I am human and you are human, hand in hand, right next to each other.
And I love that saying of we're all just walking each other home.
Hmm.
We're all here having a human experience. And it's so much more fun, so much more supportive. And that saying of if you want to go far, go alone. Is it you want to go far, go alone, but there's something about going together. It's gone
Want to
out of
go
my
far,
mind.
go together.
Yeah, but going to go fast, go alone, want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
And that sense of we don't have to do this alone. So often in the life that you were describing, what it was like growing up and being that young mum and so on, it sounded very lonely. It sounded very much you were there holding things together, carrying stuff on your shoulders, but not feeling supported. However, when we can do that together in community, in circle, or whatever word it feels good inside, then
It's also the antidote to shame. And I think definitely for high performers and high achievers, I have clients who come to me and they don't want their companies to know, they don't want their families to know, they don't want their friends to know, because there is this ulterior um persona that they have to put out there, this ego that they're living by, and not in a pride way, in a survival way, that they've learned this is who I need to be to these people. And so when we're talking about in community, and we're living in a wonderful age where there's so many resources, which actually also can be really overwhelming. But when we're talking about doing it in community, that is the antidote to shame, to be able to share your story with somebody who deserves to hear it, not just anyone, but even just to find one person or even an anonymous hotline, but being able to just speak the words and say the truth of the experience is is an incredibly helpful tool that takes you out of an awareness and into an action of shifting forward. And that is really, really common with high achievers, is that actually that's not something I'm going to look at. I'm just going to keep doing more.
Because to look at it doesn't feel safe. It feels, like you say, shaming and all the other things that are tied up within that. So it's been wonderful chatting with you today. Thank you very much for all that you've shared, Cassie. And I'm sure there are people listening who are thinking, gosh, yes, that sounds very familiar. And thinking, I would like to connect with Cassie. So where can people find you? What's the best place to connect with you? Best ways?
First of all, thank you for having me. My website is cassiewatts.co.uk. My Instagram is I am Cassie Watts, and my LinkedIn is Cassie Watts. It's all very simple, my name.
Keep it simple. And I will, as always, be sharing all of Cassie's links in the show notes below. So do have a look and connect with Cassie if this is resonating for you. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit subscribe and follow along. And see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. I hope it's given you a moment to breathe, reflect, and perhaps even see your own story with a little more compassion. If you find this conversation meaningful, I'd love it if you'd share, subscribe, or leave a review. It helps others find their way here too. Until next time, take gentle care, and remember, the journey inwards is where the real growth begins.